had an intellectual feast yesterday up until today, and I know that colleagues, as tired as we are, as much as people are leaving, yes, I'm putting pressure on you as you're leaving so that you know I see you. The official order is to heed maybe what Yiva has set out on day one in that institutional panel where he asked, well, now that we've discussed, where to from here? And this panel is then rightfully titled Reflections and Futures, where we're going to invite then our panelists to come through and sort of help us then to create or a summary, to bring together everything that's happened over the last 2 days, and to then really look to the future of this kind of Indaba and the work on decolonization and Africanization. So I'm going to ask the panel to come up. As usual, colleagues, it's home. We're not giving long biographies, just simple names and designations. Professor Heather Nell, who's the Senior Director for Institutional Strategy, will also be on the panel. A round of applause to help her come up. Hi, Prof. We're also going to be having Chanel, who's not new to the panel space. She was on the faculty presentations yesterday. So Chanel van der Merwe is a lecturer in applied languages or linguistics. Yes. And then we've also got Prof. Crane Sudeen, who was here this morning on the TIMS panel. And he's also going to be helping us to reflect on the way forward. In as much as colleagues, yes, round of applause. Yes, sorry, I cut you off on that one. Colleagues, in as much as we'd love to make it conversational, I will be working on more of a structured conversation with the panelists. I'm just trying to tie everything together. I'm hoping that you've left everything on the floor in the previous discussions and in the breakaway rooms where we did have enough time for engagement. So please forgive me for that. I don't want to seem like I'm stifling conversation, but we will deal with what the panel has to offer and then take it from there. Is that fine? Okay. So maybe to start us off, then I'm going to pose the first question to Chanel and ask then, in light of what we've heard over the past 2 days, what some of the main themes and trajectories that are emerging from this Indaba, what are you getting from it? Testing?
Hello? Okay, thank you so much, Nobu. And first of all, I just want to say thank you to the organizers for allowing me the opportunity to be on this panel. I feel sincerely honored by this. Okay, so for me, what was interesting was the different definitions of decolonization that came up through the various presentations that I saw. For some, it is critical education. For others, it is a shifting concept across different contexts. For others, it's about addressing social hierarchies. For others, it's about positioning Africa globally. But the thing that cannot leave me was listening to the SRC president yesterday. And one of the things that he mentioned really stuck with me. And he says that NMU cannot be a university where students cannot relate to their communities when they go back. This stuck with me, and I thought to myself, this captures for me the core of what we are trying to do. When we think about Vision 2030, and when we think about the vision and the mission of the university, in terms of society, a dynamic African institution, I see it as a spatial manifesto in essence. And these are powerful ways of thinking the university. In my own research, I think through the university as a spatial imaginary, and basically this is an epistemology of space. So how do we think about the university? What are imaginaries of the university, and how does this imaginary construct what is possible? So I think it's very valuable to think about it in terms of these ways. So in my own research, when I speak about multilingualism with different participants, I usually see them articulating it in two different ways. First of all, they see the university as an institutional imaginary. And here we can see the different bureaucracies of university, the mission of university coming in, the fact that we are all students and staff, we have access control to the university. It's a space that makes it recognizable anywhere. So you have to pick it up, put it anywhere else, it would be recognizable. But then I also see the university being articulated as a situated imaginary. And here I see it as what comes through is university is a geographic space. The university is a historical space. The university is an ideological space, with a particular ideological positioning, but with particular epistemic stances. And when I asked questions about language, whether it is possible to have a multilingual university, when they speak about university as an institutional space, it almost like closes down, right? They don't see it. But when they speak about university as a situated imaginary, all the possibilities open up. And I always think to myself, this is so interesting, the way in which we think about it. So I thought about what is the implications of this for the mission of the university. For instance, teaching. We work alongside protest, pivots, and instability. What implications does that have on theorizing our learning and teaching practices? And I'm speaking to myself as a lecturer here.
Can I ask Chanel that question on the implications of it, that we park it? I know that we can use that question to sort of catalyze when we're discussing futures beyond this Indaba. Is that okay, everyone? Sorry. And maybe just a second question then, perhaps more to Prof. Nell then, around a lot of what we've heard in the Indaba as well has sort of used the Vision 2030 of the university, which sort of looks to the future, and it imagines then a dynamic African university in service of society. What does the work that's been shared here at the Indaba say about us moving towards that future? I suppose it's a question of progress as well.
So thank you to the organisers for giving me the opportunity to speak on this panel, and I can just reflect over the past 2 days on this rich mosaic of different initiatives that have sprung up, that have emerged, and how they speak to the vision in very real, pragmatic ways, but also in deeply reflective and thoughtful ways as well. And it's been lovely to observe the diversity of the various initiatives and how they link to disciplines and fields and professions, but at the same time also demonstrate how they're linking to the vision and the espoused values of the university. So it's really been fantastic. And it reminded me of when we were formulating Vision 2030, and you know, Bruce's lovely skit just brought home to me the importance of voice and also being represented in the space, and your voice making a difference and shaping the outcome of whatever it is that is being constructed. And in this case, in the construction of our strategy, we were very deliberate and intentional about hearing different voices to formulate that vision. And those voices, some of them were, I just want to reflect back to you what some of those voices were saying and how these same themes have come up during the course of the last 2 days. So some of them were speaking about unequal access, and access both from a student access perspective, but also an epistemic access perspective, the centering of Eurocentric knowledge, institutional racism, an unwelcoming institutional culture, lack of demographic diversity. I could see people resonating with the professor in the previous skit that, you know, it's often people who are least connected to a particular identity who are teaching. And then they have to also, as was pointed out quite profoundly by the funder in the previous skit, that you actually have to do business with yourself and come to grips with who you represent and what your identity is and how you make space for other identities. And then we also, as we saw yesterday with the student protest and also with the current strike underway by our Nahawa workers, that one of the other issues that was mentioned is the poverty wages paid to previously outsourced employees that are now insourced, but are still experiencing much of the hardship that comes with what they're earning. So, Nobu, in reflecting on the past 2 days, it has been quite profound to see how the different voices that were raised during the Vision 2030 stakeholder consultations and engagements are being addressed in diverse ways. And this links to our theory of change in terms of the strategy as well. Our theory of change, we embrace what we call a complexity paradigm. And what we could see from the last 2 days was that diversity represents the complexities. And you know, what we deliberately make space for is emergence. So it's not a linear process of change where you say, thou shalt decolonize and Africanize, and as a result everyone jumps into action and does stuff, and then you have an effect. It's non-linear, it's circular, it's spiral, and out of that emerges such beautiful solutions to very wicked problems. So it's just been lovely to see how in all the different disciplines and faculties and spaces of the institution, like the engagement office and others, that this real beautiful complexity is emerging to give real practical expression to the aspirations that are set out in Vision 2030. So I just want to thank all the participants, because it's really been so profound to listen to everything that is happening. And it's obviously, for many, the beginning of the journey. It's not the end of the journey, but at least we're on the road and we're co-traveling. Thanks,
Thank
Nobu.
you. I think then, Prof. Crane, given your work in TIMS, when we start thinking about the ideas of Africanization and decolonization that have been presented throughout these 2 days, how has that work that we've seen emerge then through the Indaba further shaped the idea of Africanization at Mandela University and Africanization through the Mandela lens?
Thank you very much, Nobu, and thank you again for having us here, and also for putting together this absolutely important event over the last 2 days. So let me make a big point first. And that point is to say, and there are some people here who would understand the significance of this, that this university has tipped over. It's shifted. It's changed. It's not the same institution that it had been 10 years ago. And we've been very aware of that on our, if you like, engagements with the departments and going into meeting various levels of the university. It's a different place to the place that was what was there when the merger happened. And what happened over the last few days confirmed that. So that's the big point. But it is untheorized. It is as yet not something which has been made an object of study. So what I'm saying is that there's evidence of a growing self-consciousness about Nelson Mandela University of itself. It is very much more self-conscious. I go to many universities, by the way, and so but a lot of the universities that I go to could be like anywhere. Go into a maths department and I could be sitting in the maths department at Birmingham University, and it's the nature of universities now around the world. But we're discovering a desire here to be. And that desire to be is in the, and I know students are very impatient with their lecturers, but I want to say to the students, thank God you've got these bloody lecturers. You know, thank God. You know, thank God you have people who are beginning to intuit that you are from circumstances that are different from the circumstances of their own children. And that you are beginning to realize that you need to think about how to engage with the gifts that these young people are bringing in very particular kinds of ways. But we haven't got a language yet for what's going on. And this is the thing about Africanization. There's not a, and so there's still a lot of rhetoric, we must be African and all of this. And some of it is problematic, I want to say, because some of it is essentialist. It appeals to what I look like, you know, and it's not yet come to terms with this deep need to engage with the cultural depth of the histories that people are bringing with them, with the depth of those cultural histories. And that's what needs to be done. I mean, that's the epistemic project. How do you do that? How do you Africanize in a way which comes to respect, but at the same time is not deferential to what is being offered? So to come and have the sense that I have a long, long history of being, and that history has many mysteries which you could be helping me to unfold, right? And the university, I think, needs to be thinking about how to do that. And again, I'm not patting myself on the back, but I've been on many encounters, call them cross-cultural encounters around the world. Strikingly, I was in New Zealand, where you have cross-cultural theorists talking about these questions of difference in really productive kinds of ways there. And for 2 days, we had these Western-educated experts, such as myself, and on the other side, you had all of these wonderful cultural informants. And we spoke to each other, but we spoke past each other. We're in danger of that here. We don't know how to listen to the nuance of the specificities. And the nuance of those specificities, Norval, you know, is a mystery which I think we don't have the language for. So we know how to collect facts, right? We're positivists, what Enver was talking about. So we know what an empirical, so we know how to come and do an interview with you. We're going to go to the community and we're going to interview. You've got a prepared set of questions and you're going to work through those questions. But they're your questions. They come from your field of reference. They come from your orientations, your points of departure. I mean, how do you begin to connect with that which is unspoken, which refuses to be coded? It refuses to be coded. It says it doesn't want to be coded. It says to you, you know, so you're looking at a difficult encounter here, a really difficult encounter. And having the language might help, but it's not going to help entirely. You know, because you need to find modes of trust and develop modes of trust which allow that conversation to happen. For the other to understand that you are not coming here to predate. You're not coming here to steal. You're not coming here to take. You're coming to be in the presence of. And that's a hell of a thing. Yeah. You know, so so Chanel, you know, I learned a lot from talking to you yesterday. So this multilingualism thing is an absolute necessity. You've got to do it, but you've got to go beyond that. And that's not easy.
I suppose then if we can stay on the track of language then, Chanel, and if you can merge your ideas around the implications then of that decolonial future that you were talking about, but that question of language still remains as crucial as ever to the conversation around decolonization and the possibilities of progress in a decolonial direction. And in light of the work that's been shared then here at the Indaba, where does Mandela University stand in relation to this question? And maybe how might we move forward? How might we imagine then a decolonial language futures for our university?
Thanks, Nobu. Yes, I was very impressed by how many times language came up. As a linguist, I feel, and I also worked with Bruce and them in engagement, there's one thing that you are always at the back of the line when it comes to engagement in language. I feel similar ways. In South Africa, the resonances that students have and bring with them to educational spaces are the violences of assimilating to hegemonic languages, right? This is what they bring to them. So how does one first undo that? Right? So a student is, the past experiences is one of assimilation to a hegemonic language. This is how they view education, or how they view educational spaces. So I've had lecturers tell me, no, but I have printed my course material in 3 languages, but the students still prefer the English. And then therefore the student wants the English. And I feel like this inference is just highly ignorant and ignores the nuances of how languages have been de-intellectualized. And this is what I spoke about yesterday. And here I speak about African languages, but I also speak about black dialects of Afrikaans that we don't speak about enough, I think, in this university. If you do a close reading of the textual landscape of higher education, your white paper, your Higher Education Act, your ministerial reports, there are some instances of these texts positioning universities as custodians, as one of the custodians of African languages development. So we can ask ourselves, is that a good thing? Are we supposed to be the custodians? So the way in which the university then approaches the language question is to say that we're going to approach it via language policy, right? So language policy as a mechanism that is used by the university is different from the way in which language policy is used in other spaces across the world. In other spaces, language policy is the management of languages that are there, right? In South Africa, language policy means the selection of particular languages. So the university selects, the university then develops, and the university then promotes. So it's 3 things, right? At each point in time, at each of these steps is an ideological process. Whenever people speak about these steps as neutral, I always think to myself, it's never neutral. It's an ideological process at each step. For instance, what languages are we choosing? It's not a one-layered language. There's many, right? Many different varieties that exist just within the space right now. Afrikaans, you can say the same thing. Who's Afrikaans, right? And then the second part is then development. So there's first selection, then development, then promotion. So here by development is where I have the most problems. When we say we're going to develop this language, what are the forms of development that we're talking about? How do we even see development? What does that mean for us? And then who are the experts that we are selecting when we are saying we are developing these languages? Is development only translation? Is that all that we mean? Or is it also a curriculum question? And what vocabulary are we using? So what are the implications then of positioning the university as a custodian of African language development, given the coloniality of this institution? Whenever I go to conferences, I've been to so many conferences that have asked, how do we bring more African languages in? I've been to that conference. I've been to that conference 10 times over. I've never heard the question, what does it mean to be a university who uses African languages? I've never heard it from that perspective. Or can the ontology of the university ever hold indigenous multilingualism as a project? What are the ontologies of the university that is inherently incompatible with the plurality and the collectiveness that this project requires? So that would be my input.
Thank you. And I think you're, in that question of implications, you're also raising then possibilities and challenges that might be entangled with how we imagine that future. Prof. Nal, if I could ask you then, in light of the university's name change and Vision 2030 and some of the possibilities and challenges of our time, especially the challenges, since you've already spoken about the student demonstration, what kind of futures then might we imagine for Mandela University? Post-dialogue?
That's a lovely question, Nobu. So what kinds of futures can we imagine? I think that we've already started tapping into the collective imaginations of, multiple role players, and I think that's what enriched Vision 2030 to be what it actually is that it was the outcome of multiple voices really intentionally thinking about certain questions. And one of those questions was, what kind of future would you like to see Nelson Mandela University? How do you see the university into the future? And I just want to touch on a few gaps that I didn't see coming through firmly enough, I think. I think we dealt a lot with the implications of Africanization and decolonisation for the curriculum and for knowledge paradigms, for multilingualism, etc. But the one aspect which I think is critical to the future of the university is institutional culture. And I think that Bruce's skit brought to light some of the issues around institutional culture that need to be grappled with. And I'm just going to mention a few. So Crane was speaking about our institutional identity and our name Mandela University. And what does that mean? We have core values. Do people understand those values? Do they know those values? And how are they giving expression to those values, both within the classroom but also beyond the classroom in our interactions with one another? And how are we holding each other accountable to those values? So one of those values is Ubuntu. And how are we positioning the university to be a space which is about the collective rather than the individual? And Eurocentrism has shaped us to be individualistic, to want what we want when we want, and it's me at all costs. Whereas what we, I think, should be striving for, given that we have the name that we do and we're striving to live these African values, is to say, how do we promote the good of the whole? And how do we look at the collective and the collective interests of our multiple stakeholders and the interests and aspirations and dreams and hopes that they're bringing to the university space? Some of our rituals and ceremonies, we have to be transformative about, intentionally transformative about how we engage in certain rituals and ceremonies. And I've seen that happening over the years. If you just take our graduation ceremony as one ritual of the university, a very important ritual, and how we have gradually started infusing our African identity into that ritual. But there's still so much more that we can be doing. And, starting the skit just now with that, that entry was just so amazing, because it just brought home to me very visually how important it is that our rituals are intentional about recognizing different identities in the space. And one thing that hasn't really been spoken about is internationalization and our partnership footprint. We might have touched on it a little bit with funding, but are we deliberately and intentionally partnering with other African universities? When we speak Africanization, I think we need to be careful that we don't approach it purely from a South African perspective, but that we bring the richness of Africa into everything that we're doing. And that includes our heritage and our archiving and whose memory counts. And, the work of the Center for Women and Gender Studies has shown us that so profoundly over the past few years. So Nobu, there's so many different aspects of institutional culture that need attention, but I think part of imagining the future is to say, during Fees Must Fall, our students said to us that in their own Xhosa language, you don't see us. And we don't see ourselves. We don't see ourselves in the curriculum. We don't see ourselves in who's teaching us, etc. So how do we create a future for this university where all see themselves represented through what the university does, through how it is, how its sense of being is translated into daily practices and actions, and how do we really purposefully create a sense of inclusion where even as we Africanize, we create an environment in which all feel welcomed and affirmed. And I think given the multiplicity of all the stakeholders that we serve, that's not an easy task, because often the interests and the hopes and aspirations of different interest groups are radically contradictory. But that's part of complexity. We have to work through it and be very purposeful about what does it mean to truly be an African university.
Thank you so much, Prof. Nel. Perhaps as a parting thought, Prof. Sudin, around this difficult work that Prof. Nel is presenting. As someone who is part of the interdisciplinary studies of TIMS. As someone who's part of the team that's working on TIMS, where do you see then that work coming through from TIMS around mobilizing the Mandela lens for this difficult work that we need to do, and even maybe beyond that, when do we grapple with the idea of the lens being or becoming constraining at times when we need to let it go?
Yeah, there are two things that you're talking about. So you're talking about transdisciplinarity, and you're talking about the lens, and let me just deal with those separately and see if I can bring them together. So first of all, what was very clear to me here is that over these last 2 days is that a self-conscious university has to open itself up. It has to open itself up to itself. It has to look at itself. So all of us need to know a whole lot more what's going on in engineering. All of us. All of us need to know a lot more about what's going on in Bruce's project. It all ought to be the subject of scrutiny. Now, not performance scrutiny, not that end of year accountability thing where I'm going to say that he fulfilled or she fulfilled all of the KPIs and so is worthy of a bonus. Not that scrutiny. A scrutiny of our practice. So it would be really fabulous to be able to have documented, lifted up for presentation and friendly analysis what it is that we are doing. Because that friendly analysis is where we come to, in some ways, register our joint and solidarity, commitment to being part of a single project. So be open to the possibility of that I might just wander into your classroom and just sit at the back there, and not think that the act is an intrusive act, you know. And then to open it up for conversation. I really liked what you did there, but why did you do that? You know, did you think of this particular possibility in trying to explain this particular procedure? You know, and it's a wonderful form of thinking of formation, of us in formation. We are forming ourselves in that particular methodology, and it's a methodology of hope, of possibility, of endless experimentation. And this is what we've got to kind of open up our possibilities to. And this is where transdisciplinarity comes to its absolute best. It is when that sociologist is going to be in that engineering class and to say that your starting propositions are all wrong here, bro. You're not really understanding what the problems really are. So you're going to fix that pipe, but actually there are more issues around how that pipe works and serves the needs of whatever. So that's the transdiscipline, and that difficulty was demonstrated here over these last few days. We saw how clearly people are at very different levels. We saw how clearly people in the social sciences are able to begin, and let me switch to this other thing, to interpret the figure of Mandela in an interpretive way, and not in a kind of mimicking way. I want to be generous like Mr. Mandela, which is the response of a whole lot of people. When you ask them, what do you want to be? They say, I'd like to be forgiving, and I'd like to be, and the conversation has to move beyond that. And it's a difficult conversation. It's what Andre calls academic expression. And this academic expression thing is difficult. But it's a wonderful thing for everybody to go through. If you want to be a Marxist, I want to see what that Marxist commitment is expressed in what you teach, in how you teach. If you want to say you're being a Gandhiist, I want to see how it's expressed, and it needs to take expression. But you need to also say to me, mathematics is going to have difficulty, please. It is going to have difficulty. Mathematics will struggle to be able to translate, interpret Mr. Mandela, and there are your limits. Don't force it. Don't foist it on people and say, maths, we want to see Mandela in your maths. It's a stupid demand to make of people, right? But they may find creative ways of thinking about how then that spirit does come to infuse the way in which maths comes to be applied. So that's a key thing. But thinking about Mr. Mandela, we need to think not of Mr. Mandela here as a kind of master signifier which is going to overdetermine everything in the university. It can't. There are obvious limits to what that signifier can do for you. Obvious limits. The ideological limits, those ideological limits come in all kinds of forms. Patriarchy, not least of them. The ways in which particular forms of privilege, which Mr. Mandela had, which we don't even recognize, which we need to articulate. There are limits there, and you need to come to it critically. But you also want to see what the great things are. And for the moment, it is great. For the moment, there are many, many possibilities in thinking about how this figure can help us interpret the role that this university will play in the social space in which it finds itself right now.
Thank you so much. A round of applause for the panel, please. According to my timekeeper, that was perfect timing. But colleagues, please can I just encourage everyone who has heard some of the thoughts from the panel to not leave with whatever burning idea you have. And please just, I know there's a couple of Crochet and ET people, if they can just raise their hands. I think they've got the yellow stickers. And if you can just note down what you would also like added into this conversation around just summarizing and completing the conversation that we've had over the past 2 days. So please, if you could do that, I'm sure that they will receive that and add it into the report and the notes. But from my side, thank you so much to the panel. Thank you so much, Prof. Crane. Thank you so much, Chanel. Thank you so much, Prof. Nell, for assisting us to just make sense of what's been happening over the past 2 days. Thank you. I'm going to call up the senior manager of Crochet, Dr. Jenny Duprier, to assist with then some final housekeeping rules and maybe just some closing remarks. Thank you.
Nobu, are you taller than me? That's not good. Hi, everyone. Let me just check at the back that I am being recorded and everything is fine. I don't get yelled at. I think it's all good. So my job is as far as I'm concerned, the best one, which is basically to come up and give a vote of thanks to everyone who made this Indaba possible. And it was a lot of people. The idea behind this Indaba really was to try and reach as many people across the university and to showcase the work and hear the voices of as many people in the university as possible. There are huge gaps still in what we have managed to achieve, and I think for the next one, which I'm hoping is not next year, but the year after, just for organizational reasons, is something we really need to think about very carefully. I know the community stakeholders who are very, very engaged in this university's work are one of those gaps. And yeah, if you have any thoughts as to what we should add, remove, whatever, feel free to pop me an email and I'll make a folder for the planning for next time. So the questions, and I think they have been reiterated at various points throughout this colloquium, that were the linchpin of this, the conceptualization of this Indaba, were what does decolonisation look like at Mandela, as in our university, and what does it look like through the lens of Mandela, the social figure? And I think we've started to grapple with these questions here today. Prof. Keert mentioned yesterday that this should just be the start of many ongoing conversations, and I hope those conversations get taken up in various spaces across the university. We will certainly be continuing those conversations where we can. And as we were talking about in the session I was facilitating earlier, the university is constituted of the people within it, even if we don't always feel like our decisions and who we are and what we do matter to this big giant system. They really do. And yeah, so what we do matters, and I hope that this is a point from which we can work towards something better, even under very, very difficult systemic circumstances. So in some ways, when I was trying to write these, make a note of the remarks, I was struggling to figure out how to thank everyone in a way that included everyone, didn't leave anyone out. I don't think I came right, so if you feel like you have not been included, it's not for lack of trying. So this event was hosted by the Africanization-Decolonisation Working Group and the Transdisciplinary Institute of Mandela Studies in collaboration with the university faculties. And this is all part of the Africanization-Decolonisation program, or project, of the university. It hasn't necessarily been thought of that before, but as we've seen today, this work has been ongoing. So firstly, I would like to thank all the contributors who came through for this event. So that includes everyone who came through for the institutional panels, the students who sat on the student panels and who represented on the institutional panels, every single faculty. I'm not sure if there has been an event around this thematic that has brought together all the faculties before, but I found it really, really interesting to hear from people that, as someone from the humanities, you don't always hear from. So that has been really amazing. To all the individual contributors who, in their own personal capacity or as part of a project or collective, who came through to represent and to share their work, thank you so much. I think we had some really, really rich discussions today. To the Engagement Office for their very unique contribution to this event. I think it was probably the most enjoyable part of the Indaba in bringing some levity and lightness to very complicated questions. To the Transdisciplinary Institute for Mandela Studies and the professors from that side who came in to share their thoughts, especially around conceptualizing decolonisation and Africanisation through the lens of Mandela. And then to the members of the community who we maybe did not incorporate as well as we should have, but whose engagement has definitely informed the work of many, if not all of us here. As you know, there's an exhibition as part of this Indaba, and many, many thanks to the exhibitors who are willing to share their work, both in their personal capacities. I would like to give a special set of thanks to the communications and marketing team for their contribution to the exhibition, to the Mandela University Press for helping us have some books to display, and hopefully next time we can, as the press grows, we'll have much more to contribute there. And especially a thank you to the School of Visual and Performing Arts, not just for mobilizing their students and staff to share their work with us, but also for the various equipment that they've allowed us to use to display the work. So yeah, much thanks to them. To all the facilitators, also much gratitude for holding the conversations and panels and various sessions together in various ways and with such grace and generosity and with great respect to time, which we always appreciate. And then I also just wanted to give a very special vote of thanks to our Vice-Chancellor, Prof. Sibongile Mutwa, for her leadership in creating spaces for these kinds of conversations. So yes, for that, and then also for her demonstration, I think, of leadership, especially yesterday, in terms of how she engaged with the students who came to express their challenges in striving to solve the problems they were dealing with. Yeah, I think I learned a lot just from that experience, and I just wanted to say thank you for that. And then to everyone behind the scenes in various capacities who made this event possible. So Atin Kosi at Ocean Sciences for sorting out the venue, to everyone who helped make sure this venue was clean and secure, that we could leave valuable equipment overnight and none of it walked away. So much appreciated for that. To the suppliers who helped us with furniture and catering, to our audiovisual team and media services team who helped us to share this online and to record it. There will be recordings of this made available. Just give us some time to edit, and then we will share the links across the university. So if there's any panels you missed or things you want to go back to, that will be available. And also to those who helped with all the framing and hanging of the exhibition work as well. And finally, to the people I work with very closely and who are the best part of my job, I always tell them this, to the organizing team. So that's the Crushet and ETP office teams. So the Chair for Critical Studies in Higher Education Transformation and the Engagement and Transformation Portfolio Office. Every single one of them in some way or another has contributed to this event. I'm sure you've met many of them in the course of your involvement over the last 2 days. And I just want to extend a very, very heartfelt vote of thanks to them for making all this possible, for all the emotional and administrative support, for being willing to go the extra mile in all sorts of different ways. So a great amount of thanks to that. And then, of course, to everyone who just came through to listen, to chat, to engage in any form, thank you so much. We really appreciate all the support. Yeah, and I'm looking forward to seeing what we as a university community do next. Thank you so much. And on that note, on behalf of Prof. Kiet, who had to go and do DVC things, I declare this Indaba closed. Please go home and rest and have a wonderful weekend.